guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be doing a little bit of a sew along. We are going to be sewing up a Russian belt pattern. Yes, sounds really strange. It's not. I've been looking at all the Russian patterns out there and there are some really good Russian sewing companies. Guys, if you're not on it, you should get on it because there's some really cool patterns out there of clothes that I've already seen out and I'm like, I wish there was a pattern of that. They have a lot out there. So if you haven't already, just go down that rabbit hole. I promise you, you will not regret it. So the pattern company that I have found this particular item is from Grasser Patterns. Now they have two websites. They have an English website, but they also have a Russian website. And I found that the Russian website has hundreds, and I mean like hundreds more patterns than the English website does. I think they are doing like a slow transition to make some of their instructions in English, but the pattern that I found was on the Russian website. I will leave all the links below so that you guys can have a look at both of them, and I would definitely suggest using a browser that has like the auto translate, like Google Chrome. When I go onto any site that has a different language, it automatically translates it to English. So that was a really big help. So if you're going to do that, then you know, and navigate the site, that would be better. The best thing about this pattern though is that it's a free pattern. Free download, guys. So go ahead, check it out. Make sure you look at their sizing guide because it can be a little bit complicated, but once you've got your size, just go ahead and download it and then sew along with me. I did have a look on the internet to see if anybody else had like made this pattern, and I think one person has, but the instructions are in Russian as well as the person being Russian, and everything's in Russian. So if you don't speak Russian and you are not Russian, then it might still be a little bit difficult. So that's why I decided to make this video, because I really enjoyed making it, and I feel like if you don't want to print off the instructions, you can just watch the video and just do it that way. So without further ado, this is what I made. I made this really cute belt. Now, like, I guess when you're holding it like this, it looks a bit strange because it's like made out of faux leather and it kind of needs to be around the waist. But as you can see, it's kind of like a peplum style corset-ish belt with a tie at the front, and then this bit kind of goes around your waist, and then these bits kind of like sit over your hips. So really good if you've got like a long dress and you kind of want to cinch in at the waist, or like you're wearing like an oversized shirt and you want to like in the waist, you know what I mean? So this is something that I've been looking at, and there are so many different versions out there online, and I didn't know I could make one myself until I saw this one. So I was really happy that you can download this for free. Like, I'm still like, wow, I can't believe I just made that for free. So yeah, this is what we're gonna make. I used a faux leather. You can use any material that you like, but if you are gonna use a faux leather, try and make sure that it's one that you can put underneath the sewing machine. Obviously, the thicker it is, the harder it's gonna be for you to sew it together. There are some bits where you kind of need to sew right sides together and flip it out. So if you're using something that's like really stiff, I would probably not do that step and do it wrong sides together, and maybe just do some sort of like edge coat to make sure that you've got clean edges. I used a top stitch thread as the thread because I wanted it to be quite thick, but other than that, I pretty much just put this onto the sewing machine. There are like minimal pattern pieces, and it's quite simple to put together once you know what each piece does. If you guys are interested, then keep watching and we can sew this together. So before we go into the pattern pieces, first of all, you will come across this page, which I suggest printing out first, because this way you can determine what your printer settings are. As you can see, there is a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter square, which you can then measure. As you can see, my printer settings are fine. You want to print out at actual size. So if there's a scale, then you want 100% and it should come out perfect. So do that first, and then we'll look at the pattern pieces. Okay, so these are all the pattern pieces that you will need for the belt. Not that many pattern pieces, and I think it came out to about 5 pieces of A4 paper, so it isn't actually a ton of paper. It's not a lot of cutting and sticking. Really straightforward, so that's good. So let's just go through the pieces. This here, this really long one, it goes across all of the pattern pieces, and it's kind of like in the corner. You don't really know it's there until you like stick it all together and have a good look. It's like right in the corner, so make sure you don't accidentally get rid of this, because you will need this. These are going to be the front ties. size. So you're going to need to cut 2 of these. This little doodad here will go on top of this, which is the waist belt. This is the bit that's going to be flat against your waist, and this here is where the opening for our ties are going to come through. So this is going to go on top, and what will happen is you'll kind of sew around it and then sew around that little hole, and then it will make a little slot in the middle, but it will be like a nice little design feature. So that is that, and you're going to need to cut 2 of these. This is the waist belt, like I just said. This one you're going to cut on fold, and you're going to cut 2 of these as well on the fold. Okay, so we've got these last 2 ones here, which is the center back and the center front. So this part here, just move this out the way. So this one here, this is the center back, and this is the cutout. So when you are cutting this one out, you want to cut on the fold, and you want to place this line here on the fold, and then cut all of this out. And what you're going to do, you're going to want 2 of those, and then you'll have 2 long back pieces that you can place together. So the next bit is the center front. These are the side seams. There's not a lot of markings on these, so it makes sense to, on the inside of your chosen fabric, to mark where the side seams are, because it's not entirely obvious when you start sewing, because they all kind of look a little bit the same. So just mark your side seams so that you know that when you are sewing them together, you know which one's side seams to side seams. But this is the front, and you're going to need to cut 4 of these, and not on the fold, because these are going to be where it gets fastened in the middle, and that bit is going to be open, so you're going to have a nice clean edge there. And that's the bottom, and this is the side seam. And that is all the pattern pieces. Really, really simple. When you cut them out, try to be as economic as you can with the leather. I think I used about 1 meter of faux leather, and all my pattern pieces now look like this. As you can see here, we've got the back piece here, which there are 2 of, and then you've got 4 front pieces, which you'll end up laying together so that they're like that. And as you can see, I put a little dot where the side seams are, so I know when I'm sewing them up that these are the bits that I'm going to sew together. So this is the thread that I'm going to be using for the project. It is a top stitching thread, so it's actually quite a thick thread, which works really well with these needles, which are leather needles, and I'm going for the one with like the biggest eye. These are the things that I'm using. Let's get on with it. I would also, with your scrap fabrics, suggest doing a lot of different stitches. As you can see, I went through like loads of thicknesses. I found that I didn't have very good tension, and I kept making the tension higher and higher and higher until I had a stitch that I liked. So I ended up with a tension of 9 and a stitch length of 4. So let's start with putting the back and the front pieces together. So as you can see, this is the back piece, and these are 2 front pieces. What I did was mark on the inside which ones are the side seams, and the next thing you need to do is join those side seams together. Now you want it so that this curved point and this long point are pointing downwards, like this one is, so they're kind of mirroring each other. So you're going to put the side seam there, and with this one your side seam is going to go there. So you want to sew 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter here and here. Once you've done that, you want to do it again for the other section. Okay, so once you have sewed it together, you want to kind of like finger press this open. We are going to finish this later, and there are different ways you can do it. If you have a fabric glue, you can glue these down. You can use a clapper to keep them flat, or you can just use your fingers. If you're using a fabric that can be pressed, you can press, but I would definitely put a cloth over this because you don't want to melt it, especially if it's like faux leather. You can use like a really low heat and just get that down. Or if you want to put it through the machine and kind of like stitch it down and have like a top stitching feature at the front, you can also do that. And I think that's what I'm going to do for my one. So I'm going to tie these off at both ends, and I'm also going to do this to the back. Okay, so this is what it should look like when you have sewn your front pieces to your back pieces. It should look like this nice semicircle. Next, you're going to pick up one of your top waistbands, the one where you made all these nice markings on, and using these 2 notches to match with these 2 side seams, you are going to join these all together. So once you've done that, you want to sew across the top, and then you want to do the exact same thing for the other one. Okay, so when you have sewn your pieces together, it should look a little something like this. Now what you want to do, like we did with these bits, you want to finger press these open or use the glue or sew them down. Whichever way you are finishing your things, do that. So I am going to go ahead and, like these double stitch lines here, I'm going to double stitch across the top and the bottom to flatten it down. But it's starting to look like a belt. So remember to do the exact same thing to the other side as well. Okay, so after you have sewn your top to the bottom of the belt and you have top stitched along and everything looks really nice and neat, I'll just show you the inside so everything's kind of flat and together. There are two ways that you can put both the front and the back together. The first way is you can go right sides together. I would suggest doing this if you have a flexible fabric, if you're using maybe a suede, or like this is like not very thick, it's very, very flexible, so you can do it because you have to turn it in and it will be a little bit bulky around those edges. If you're using something a lot stiffer, I would suggest wrong sides facing and stitching along the outside and all the way around the entire thing, and then using a marker pen to color in the edges when they're together, because you might be able to see the white, or using something like an edge coat, depending on what fabric you're using. If you are using something that is really, really flimsy, like it's a lace or whatever, because you can make this out of anything you want, then maybe I would consider using like a binding or something decorative to clean up those edges. So when this is closed, this will be the front, and that's like how the belt works. So what we're going to do now is give you some nice clean corners. So use your clips to line these up together, making sure that these seams here are lined up. So we're going to stitch across here, across all the way the top straight band, and then down. We're not going to stitch the bottom half because we're going to stitch that once we've turned it inside out. Okay, so now that you have stitched everything together, it should look like this, inside out, but one piece. So what you want to do now is just give it a little bit of a trim round, not too close to the stitching because we don't want it to unravel. And then we want to also trim these corners here so that when we turn them out, they can be nice and pokey. And then we want to turn it to the outside. Okay, so I've turned it out the best that I could. I think this is a little bit thicker than I actually anticipated. So what we're going to do is a top stitch all the way around about 1/4 inch. So that's like a 0.6 centimeters all the way around, including the bottom. So that includes matching these up and sewing around the edges. But first we need to clip them together just to make sure they are even and that they're matching each other. I find it's easier if you roll it a little bit, and then you can get the, it rolls all the way to the actual seam line, so that helps. If you did it the other way and sewed everything wrong sides facing, then this should be nice and flat already, and all you need to do is kind of do the edges. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just whatever way you want. If you want the aesthetic look of having a closed edge, you can do it that way. If you want it to have open edges, you can do it that way. I've seen this made in denim, and someone had frayed edges, and that also looked really, really good. Okay, so I've done the top, and now I'm going to do the bottom. I'm going to start by pinning these seam lines together on here and here, and then I'm going to go up and do the points. So as you can see, I've pinned everything together, and this is the bit where I ran out of fabric. So I'm going to make sure that this is the inside of the belt, so that that bit on the outside stays how I want it to look. Now we're going to stitch all the way around and all the way around the bottom until I come back to the point where I started. Okay, so this is what it looks like so far. As you can see, I have sewn all around the edges. We've got some nice corners going on here, as well as all of these bottom corners here. Next thing you want to do is just trim any of the excess that's around so that it's like an even spacing all around, nice and neat and also equal. And then we can go and start on our ties. So these are going to be your ties. And now it's actually only one tie, but it's going to be double-sided. So what we're actually going to do is put them together so that they're one and stitch all the way around it. Of of an inch seam allowance all the way round, make this nice and neat. And in the end, when we do the edges of the belt, we will also do the edges of the ties. Now what I'm gonna do is just make sure this is all level. I've got quite a bit of trimming to do, so I don't think I cut these very even. Yeah, they're not very even at all, so we're just gonna trim the whole thing. That is my cord ready to go. Nice. Okay, so on to the last bit before we are pretty much finished. So this is what your belt is going to look like now. What we're going to do now is put these on top of here. Now what you want to do is try and transfer these markings to the outside. I was trying to think of a good way to do this, but I couldn't really think of one without making permanent holes. So what I'm going to do instead is put some tape across, and this is magic tape, put some tape across the top like this. Hopefully this will work. I'm basically figuring it out right now with you guys. So I'm going to put some tape across the top like this. Then I'm going to use a pin to prick through the four corners of this rectangle. I'm also going to prick about 1/4 of an inch in the four corners of the square as well, because that's also going to be another stitching line. So hopefully when I switch this over, we should see, oh yeah, a whole bunch of holes. And then what I can do, if I grab this red pen so that you guys can see, is connect the dots on the front so that we have a visible stitching line that we can use to stitch this to the front of our thing. So that's the big square, and then I can't quite see, oh yeah, okay, and then you and you, yeah, yep, and yeah, yep. Okay. Hopefully that will work. And then once you have this, you can then stick that in this corner where you made the marking underneath, and then you can stitch around and then around the center, and then you should be able to just peel this off afterwards. So do that for this side, and then also do this for the other side. Okay, so this is what it should look like once you have stitched your little square. And then if you have a look here, this is what I have, what I've done now is cut open the little rectangle in the middle, but not crossing the stitching line. And then this is going to become the hole that you thread your tie through. So what you do is you would thread it through one and then thread it through the other and tie them in the middle. So what we're going to do is use either a craft knife, or if you have a rotary cutter or some very sharp scissors, to just cut a little line in the center and then score the sides so that you can cut a really small rectangle out in the middle, but not cutting through the stitching line. As you can see here, I've just cut a little square in there, and then you can check to see if it will fit through and whether you need to make it bigger or not. And as you can see, it fits through perfectly. And well, that is pretty much it. That is the whole belt done. The last thing you want to do now is to either paint your edges, bind your edges, or use a leather edge coat. So you can use a black marker or a marker in the same color as your fabric, but I'm going to use some leather edge coat because I kind of want to seal the edges too. So I'm going to go get a little paintbrush, I'm going to do a little bit of painting, and then I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to do the same with this bit here, and I'll probably do the same inside here, and then you guys can see the end result. Okay, so last thing, very last thing, I painted the edges with the edge coat, and if you have a look here, you will see that that's the bit that was a bit small, so I painted it black so you could like not notice it so much. But if you actually have a look, you can see now that all the edges are now black, and the same with the belt. So what I did, because it needs to dry and I wanted it to kind of dry closed, I kind of clasped all the edges so that they stay together. Yeah, and that's it. So now I'm just going to wait for that to dry. It will take probably about an hour, and then it's good for wearing. So yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you stay tuned, I will show you what it looks like on. So that is how I made the belt. Obviously there are different ways that you can make it, and there are different fabrics you can make it in. Hopefully this is just like a nice guideline so you know what the pieces do and how they go together, and then you can just let your imagination run wild. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching to the very end. If you have enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit that like button and hit that notification bell so you know when I come up with some more videos. Send me a comment, let me know what you think of like the process. Like, do you want to see more Russian translation of patterns? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, then subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.